Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really specific and kind of intense source. It's called Uncle Seknakts' Essential Guide to the Left-Hand Path.
Yeah, provocative title, isn't it? And what's key here is that we're looking only at this specific text, the 1999 book by Webb from Raven Press.
Right, so our goal today isn't some grand overview of everything ever labeled left-hand path.
Exactly. We're sticking strictly to what this book lays out. We want to pull apart its philosophical structure, its methods, based just on what Webb presents here. Forget the common spooky stereotypes for a minute.
Okay, so let's start with that name, Uncle Seknakts. It's obviously a pseudonym. Who is Webb, the actual author? What gives him the authority to write the essential guide?
Well, according to the book itself, Webb positions himself as a long-term practitioner, like 20 years deep into the left-hand path when this was written.
Okay, so experience.
And critically, he's identified explicitly as a high priest of the Temple of Set. And he holds or held administrative roles there too.
Ah, okay. So Uncle Seknakts isn't just a random quirky name. It connects directly to a known, pretty visible organization within this whole sphere.
Precisely. It signals that this isn't just one person's idiosyncratic take. It's tied to the, let's say, institutional knowledge of the Temple of Set's approach to the LHP.
That context is super important because, wow, this book makes no bones about its audience right from the start. There's this line on the cover.
Oh, yeah. The disclaimer. Or maybe it's a boast.
Right. It says the book is only wanted for significant and brilliant men and women. I mean, that immediately sets a tone, doesn't it? It's either deeply elitist or intensely challenging.
It's a massive filter, isn't it? It screams, this isn't your average spiritual self-help book. It frames the LHP, or at least this version of it, as this incredibly demanding, very individual path, a philosophical project almost.
So to even understand why it demands, quote, brilliance, we probably need to define what this path actually is, according to Webb.
Exactly. And that's where we can contrast it a bit, maybe. Most paths people talk about, often called the right-hand path or RHB, they're generally about seeking union, right?
Yeah, union with God, the divine, the universe, dissolving the ego, finding oneness, that sort of thing.
Right. Submission, merging. The left-hand path, as Webb lays it out here, just flips that completely. It's the path of separation, deliberate separation.
Separation. Okay, unpack that.
It's the active refusal to dissolve the self, the ego. The core goal isn't union. It's, well, self-deification might be the term used, or at least the radical strengthening and objectification of the individual self, making the I into something solid, unique, powerful.
Wow. Okay, so that's why it might require a specific kind of mind, one that can handle that level of self-focus and separation from the norm.
That seems to be the implication. A mind capable of intense self-analysis, introspection, and importantly, detaching from, all the usual conditioning and collective thought patterns.
That perfectly sets up the first chapter Webb discusses, the nature and goals of the left-hand path. It's basically the manifesto for achieving that separation.
It lays the foundation. And then the rest of the book seems to flow pretty logically from there. First, the inner work you need to do.
Right, the internal stuff.
And then it moves towards the external actions, the practices.
Okay, let's get into those internal practices because some of the chapter titles later on are pretty striking. Chapter 2 pairs sabotaging sek and the yoga of isolation. Isolation makes sense, maybe, in a path of separation, but sabotaging? What does that mean here? It sounds aggressive.
That does sound jarring. Yeah, but it's probably not about, keying your neighbor's car.
Okay, good.
The isolation part, the yoga of isolation, that seems pretty straightforward in this context. It's the practice of separating your own true inner voice, what Webb might call the neater, maybe from all the noise, the collective mind, societal expectations, inherited junk. You isolate to hear yourself.
Okay, makes sense. Creating quiet space internally. So where does the sabotaging come in? Is it like actively destroying the noise?
That's a good way to put it, yeah. The sabotaging seems to refer to the active intellectual dismantling of those things, your assumptions, your cultural programming, the default settings that tie you to that RHP collective mindset.
So you're deliberately undermining the status quo, but inside your own head.
Exactly. It's an internal demolition job. You're wrecking the prefabricated structures in your mind to make room for something genuinely you. It's all aimed at achieving that profound individual separation, that self-mastery.
That sounds incredibly difficult and maybe destabilizing. You're knocking down your own mental walls on purpose.
Potentially, yes. It implies a high degree of self-awareness and control to navigate that without just, falling apart.
Which leads right into the next couple of chapters then. Chapter 3 is the nature of the self and the cosmos, and Chapter 4 is the uses and virtue of shadow.
Right, so first defining that self you're trying to isolate and build, and understanding its place or non-place in the grand scheme. The book seems to frame the individual as this unique point of reality within a larger cosmos that's kind of perceived subjectively anyway.
And then the shadow. Okay, we hear about shadow work in psychology, like Jungian ideas, embracing the darker bits of yourself. Is that what Webb's getting at?
It seems related, but maybe taken a step further. It's not just about acknowledging the shadow for like psychological wholeness or social integration.
So not just making peace with your grumpy side?
Probably not, no. The virtue of the shadow, as Webb presents it, seems to be its raw power, its energy, its capacity to act outside the bounds of convention or niceness.
Ah, so for the LHP practitioner aiming for godhood or mastery, you can't just suppress those parts.
Exactly. You need them. They have to be integrated and, crucially, utilized. The shadow isn't just accepted, it's put to work to fuel the will, to make the individual self more complete, more potent. It's radical self-acceptance, yes, but for the purpose of radical self-use.
Okay, that's a key distinction. It's not therapy, it's armament.
Something like that, yeah. Building the complete self-directed being.
All right, so we have this philosophy of separation, the methods of isolation and internal sabotage, and this tool of integrating the shadow for power. How does this newly forged, brilliant self actually do things in the world? Now we're shifting outward, right, to magic.
Yes, exactly. And the book gives this significant weight. Chapters 5 and 6 are the nature of magic, and then, interestingly, why magic is magic.
So magic isn't just some optional add-on here, it's core.
It seems absolutely central. It's presented as the operational physics of this path, the way the self interacts with and shapes reality.
But why the need for a whole chapter on why magic is magic if it's just, applied will or something? Why justify it so much?
Well, maybe because the whole philosophy hinges on it being real and effective in a specific way. Magic here isn't about asking nicely. It's presented as the mechanism by which that defined, separated, powerful self imposes its will onto reality.
So, because the goal is self-creation, magic is the tool of that creation.
Precisely. And Webb seems to justify it philosophically by saying it's the natural, almost inevitable consequence of achieving that internal state. You've done the work, you've separated, you've integrated, therefore your will has impact. It's assertive.
You're not petitioning spirits or gods for help.
No, you are the source, in a sense. You're demanding reality align with your now potent will. The why is because you've supposedly become the kind of being whose will matters objectively.
Okay. That's a bold claim, and if that's the action, the doing part, what's the ultimate point? The final achievement. Chapter 7 gives this very abbreviated answer, achieving XT.
Yeah, just those two letters, XT.
So let's clarify that for everyone listening. What is XT?
The XT stands for Exper, spelled X-E-P-E-R. It's an Egyptian hieroglyph, often translated as a verb. I've come into being, or sometimes just to become.
I have come into being. So that's the peak experience, the culmination.
It seems to be presented as the core principle, the result of the whole self-creation project. But maybe not a static end state, more like a continuous process of becoming. You achieve Ekber by constantly realizing yourself, transforming, growing beyond limits. It's the state of being your own author, actively and ongoingly.
Wow, that sounds relentless, a lifelong commitment to self-transformation.
That seems to be the idea. It's not a weekend workshop.
Okay, so once someone is theoretically armed with this philosophy, this integrated self, the magic, how does Webb suggest putting this into practice? Like, are there rituals, group work, despite all the isolation talk?
Yeah, it does shift gears towards the end. The final sections, chapters 8 through 11, get into the practical application. And you're right, despite the focus on separation, there is structure. Ritual seems to serve maybe two functions.
Okay.
One, as a way to intensely focus the individual's will. And two, sometimes as a way to interact with other individuals who are also on this path, pursuing Zekper.
So what kind of specifics does Webb give about these practices? Are there instructions?
He outlines things like the Great Workings, which sound like major long-term magical projects. He also details the setup for rituals, like circle, triangle, and key circles. And there's a chapter on circle rituals in practice.
So even for these radical individualists, there's a shared methodology, some common structures.
It seems so. It suggests that even if the goal is unique selfhood, there are established techniques believed to be effective in getting there, or at least in focusing the work.
And this kind of brings us right back to where we started, with the author's background. Because the very last chapter ties it all together explicitly, doesn't it? The left-hand path as lived by the people of Set.
It absolutely does. It grounds the entire potentially abstract philosophy right back into that specific organization,
Ah.
the Temple of Set.
Which raises a really important question for anyone reading this or for you listening.
Yeah. How much of this is universal LHP theory? And how much is a specific doctrine and practice of the Temple of Set as interpreted by Webb?
Right. The core ideas, self-deification, separation, using the shadow, magic as will, you might find echoes of those in other LHP currents. But the specific rituals, the terminology like Saper, the key circles, that seems very much tied to this particular group.
Webb is definitely presenting his organization's implementation of LHP principles. It's a specific flavor, a specific school of thought within that broader, often murky category.
Okay, so let's try to distill this. If we boil down Webb's essential guide, what's the core message? He's presenting the left-hand path not just as some edgy rebellion, but as a rigorous, demanding system.
Yeah, a cohesive philosophical and practical system, and one explicitly aimed, let's not forget, at the perceived intellectual elite, the significant and brilliant.
A system built on radical self-isolation, on actively sabotaging your own conditioning, on integrating the shadow for power.
And using a specific form of assertive magic, all geared towards achieving and maintaining this state of I have come into being, continual self-creation.
So the big takeaway from this particular source, from Uncle Seknakts, is that it offers a very defined, step-by-step methodology. It's not vague. It's a blueprint for radical self-creation and mastery.
Exactly. It's almost like an intellectual obstacle course disguised as an occult text. It demands the practitioner forge themselves into this realized objective thing, separate from what it sees as the illusions of the collective mind.
Which leaves us with a pretty potent thought to mull over. We've seen how this specific path, as Webb describes it, demands brilliance, demands isolation, demands intense inward focus for self-development.
It really emphasizes turning away from the herd, so to speak.
So if the path to this kind of profound individual mastery requires such intense separation, what's the trade-off? What do you potentially lose by cutting yourself off from shared experience, from collective wisdom, from external reference points?
Yeah, it's true. Deep mastery, even possible in a vacuum, entirely self-referential. Or does it always need context, contrast, connection?
That's definitely something for you to think about until our next deep dive.